And we're back with another episode of Drop Your Noise. Hey, if you're new to the show, my name is Kipti, the host. Now, I have a confession to make. Did you know that I am a music buff? I love music. In fact, you can often find me with headphones in my ear, music on full blast, and I am completely immersed in the sound and lost in my imagination. In fact, for me, that is my meditation. For me, that is my joyful well being. And you may be wondering, why am I sharing this with you? Well, this week's guest is Bilal. Now, Bilal is also a host of a show called Festival Sound. Together with his co-host Tilly, they talk about all things festival. Not just about music though. Under all of it, they have this amazing way to share about the human connection that happens in festivals. That beauty side of our humanity that I often sometimes think we are forgetting in this very busy, noisy world. Now, how did I meet Bilal? I met Bilal last year together with another friend of ours, Tanya. And the first time we sat down and talked at a podcast conference, it's as if we knew each other for such a long time. We were so curious and excited and shared stories. Maybe that's got to do that we are into podcast shows or we're hosts. I don't know. But I tell you one thing that struck out was Bilal's sense of joyfulness, his lightheartedness, and his way of seeing life through those lenses. So I wanted you to get to know him too. And that is why I invited him to the podcast. And I did not know where the conversation was going to go, and neither did he. We literally hit record and just started having a conversation as though we were back in that podcast conference. I got out of it the pursuit of joy, and I would love to know what you would get out of it. Now, you may wonder, why isn't this in a video format? Well, you see, in the festival, not many people know what Bilal looks like. In fact, some of his listeners have met him, and the stories he shares, how excited they are to meet him because they don't know what he looks like, just was a joyful experience in itself. And I wanted to keep it in the same way. I do hope you listen to their podcast show. And if you do bump into him, do say hi. All right, let's get on with it. Enjoy this week's episode. I never would have gone to what you did. So shall we just let it out of the bag and say, what do you do? What is it that I find so interesting you do?
Well, when we first met, it was at a podcasting conference, the first day of the first podcasting conference I had ever been to, because podcasting was new to me. At that point, I had 10 episodes out, and somehow we had hit the charts of UK music podcasts.
Amazing.
And within a couple more episodes, we only for a day, I should add, but we were the number one music podcast in the country.
Hey, that's cool.
Yeah, and we were in the top 10 for a little while as well. And being so new to it and not having any background, I thought, do you know what? I should go to this conference and I should see what people are doing with podcasting, professionals. And because you can always learn from other people's experience.
Of course, yeah.
And I met you, and then we started speaking, and then our friendship began from that. But the podcast is are we recording?
Yeah, we have been for a while by now.
Very smart. So the podcast is you've thrown me there. No, so the podcast is Festival Sounds. It's a music festival podcast, but the premise of it is you can focus on the music and the entertainment at festivals, but actually that means nothing if the crowd is a toxic crowd and if the vendors who are there supporting the festival don't bring their energy as well. Mm-hmm. And if all those people who have a part to play, so volunteers and people who work temporary jobs, that's what makes a festival special. And so I wanted to just speak to people involved in those different elements of podcasts. Those different elements of festivals. And that's how the podcast was born. And it began with me just speaking to people I knew who I'd met through going to festivals as either a volunteer or as a ticket holder. And some of the early episodes were around, how do you get to a festival if you have accessibility needs? UK festivals they're in a field.
Yeah.
They're not designed for accessible needs that the customers may have. And so I spoke to a friend about that. And I spoke to someone about, when are you ever too old to go to a festival? And this is a friend of mine who is in his 70s and went to his first music festival in his late 60s.
There's hope for me yet?
You have plenty of time. Everybody has plenty of time. But one of the messages I wanted to convey, and we'll talk, I'm sure, about my background as being British Pakistani.
Yeah.
That everyone should be welcome at festivals. The whole point of these events are that no matter what your background, you should feel at home there. And home turns out to be just a piece of fabric, a tent that covers you for the night and a sleeping bag. And there's a great leveler in that, or there should be. And if you adopt a level of elitism that you see in regular society, then you've lost the point of what a festival is there for. So those festivals where you do get a creep of hospitality areas, actually they lose something that's almost intangible. And those intangibles, those are the people I'm speaking to on my podcast, because they are the ones who make something special. And I think it's slowly being forgotten. And so the premise for me is to bring those people to the fore, give an audience to those types of people. And it's not about getting famous people or celebrities on there.
You're like me in that way.
We've already heard everything they have to say. And they're so media trained that you are not going to get any insights that you can't get from Google. Because
absolutely,
they sanitize everything that they say, whereas you get a very raw answer to the questions when I ask, because these people have not been media trained. My guests are just telling it how it is. They will tell you a band they don't like as much as they will tell you which bands they do like. Now, you wouldn't catch people who are media trained giving that kind of contrast, because it's trained out of people to almost give that opinion. So it feels sanitized and boring. And so the podcast, out of nothing, just me and a microphone, and now my co-host, Tilly, someone who I met when she was volunteering. We happened to camp next to each other.
No way, really?
That's how we know each other. And she was one of those people who brought an energy at the time she was a student.
Okay.
And so she brought a very different perspective to that I had, having graduated quite a long time ago. And it works because we get on, and we've known each other for years before I invited her onto the podcast as a guest. And she was so good that she ended up becoming my co-host.
You know what whenever I hear your episodes, I do love that rawness. I really enjoy the rawness and the bantering also between the two of you. You know, the way you dialogue, it just feels as if I'm sitting on the same table with 4 people and having a great conversation in the kitchen. That's how it feels like.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. And it's what we're aiming for, but it's almost accidental every time, because we're not aiming to be, in inverted commas, professional.
Yeah. And I'm like you, I was new to podcasts when we met. And when I went to the conference, I felt overwhelmed because it became like this really professional, like you said, it gets sanitized and everybody's trying to put on their best things. And I was like, then we kind of tell people podcast is about authenticity, but we remove the authenticity as well. And then you shared with me about Glastonbury, which I heard about, but the only image I had was with my camera, everybody with their phones up, recording everything. And you made me feel as if, have you ever heard of asterisk and obliques? The
Yes, I have. It's been a while, but yes, I had to get the gears turning in the brain.
But you know, asterisk and obliques are like they're like these adventures, and they're just unfiltered, but they have this, I don't know, like sass about them, which I really like. So they rock up into these different tribes and everything. And so when you were explaining to me about what you were doing and the people you were meeting and what else there is in Glastonbury, I felt like obliques walking behind you, looking for those mazes and the human pods almost. And then you explained to me, because I was like, how do you get tickets, and and you said there's a group of you and there's WhatsApp. And I thought, wow, the power of human connection underneath all of this. It's just this amazing human connection that's going on. But I don't think I'd have ever vied for it or want to now go to Glastonbury as much as when I spoke to you. And
wow.
That is, wow, I thought that is where I came from. Like, that's his strength.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. And there is a part of the podcast where we do think that people get anxious. It's an unknown. They might not have had, and this is where I can bring in my personal experience. My family, immigrants into the UK.
Yeah.
We didn't have that culture of camping or to go camping.
Not at all.
And let alone to go camping at a music festival. But we also didn't have that culture of going to gigs, thoroughly working class upbringing. And so you just didn't do those things. And also, you didn't see that many Asian faces in these places back in the 80s and 90s. So it was harder for them, my parents that is, to see that connection as it's something that we would go, because you get very used to being conditioned into where you belong and where you don't by what you see on the news or what you see,
absolutely,
or what people talk about, those kind of things.
Or the comments like, oh, we don't go there. I used to
exactly.
We don't do that.
It's not for us.
Yeah.
That's not what people like us go to. And so I had to do it for myself. I had to figure it out for myself. And I assume that my listeners may feel the same way, that they may want to go to a festival, but they don't know what it's like, or they don't know what the people are like, and how they're going to be welcomed. So here's a platform where I can share those individual stories, and the listeners can understand, oh, maybe if I bumped into someone like that, that doesn't sound so bad after all. And there is an element of that. And then going back to why it's so raw, we don't know how to fail, because our target for listeners is 10 people per episode. Because
your target for episode is 10 people for episode.
Yeah, if we get 10 people to listen to an episode, we are over the moon.
Yeah, I can imagine. I feel like that. I feel like when you tell me that, I'm like, oh my God, somebody's listening.
Yeah, our episodes are 30 minutes long. And if I can get 30 minutes of attention from someone, or let alone 10 people, well, that's a massive victory. Public speaking is such a difficult discipline to master. So I've caught someone's attention, or 10 people's attention for 30 minutes. That's success.
Yeah.
And if we happen to get 1,000 downloads in a day, which over the course of last summer did happen, okay, that's fine. But it doesn't change what we do, because our target stays 10 people. And then you cannot fail, because you will always get 10 people on something as big as what we do in terms of music in the UK. You'll always get 10 people interested, but then you'll stop pandering to the masses. And if we did that, we would become very uniform with every other music podcast out there.
So here's one question. Have you gone to Glastonbury and someone ever come up to you and says, hey, I listened to your podcast? And if it has, how did that make you feel? I mean, I think that's just, I think that moment for me would be amazing.
It was mind blowing the first time it happened. There's two elements or two stories I can tell here. The first one, on the Thursday of Glastonbury 2024, I was walking past the pyramid stage. There's no music on the stage on the Thursday. And I was just chatting to my friends. We're walking along, having a nice conversation. And a total stranger turned round and said, "Excuse me, are you Festival Sounds?" Now, that blew my mind because I do not put my face out there. It's audio only. There's no video.
Nothing of you other than...
Purely he recognized me off my voice. And I couldn't believe that had happened. I had a pocket full of stickers that I get printed, and I give them to people as I'm just chatting to them. And I gave him a handful of stickers, and I said, "Please do contact me on social media. Tell me who you are. You've made my day." And I sent him one of our branded T-shirts. We have a handful of them that we only give to guests or what we call friends of the show.
Oh, how lovely.
So I sent one of those over to him in the post, and I was blown away by that my voice, just my voice, would resonate to the point that someone walking through a field would hear it and think, "Oh, I know who this person is," because he had developed that relationship there with what I was saying. And that blew my mind. And that's when I realized for the first time that I was having an impact on people.
Yeah, because Glastonbury is really huge also. I mean,
200,000 people.
And then to find that one person come up and tell you that, you know, it is in its own way magnificent.
It is. It's staggering. And then going on to the stickers that I carry, what I would do, because festivals are these kind of places, and my nature is to strike up conversation with total strangers.
Yeah, that's you.
It does sum me up. I'm almost made for this. And there's this amazing table in one of the green fields, where the green fields is an area which is dedicated to kind of living at one with nature and environmentalism and those causes. And there's someone I know who carves these tables, massive tables and chairs out of redwood. This thing is maybe 3-4 meters long. It's a huge thing.
Wow.
And I was just sat there having a conversation with a total stranger. And I don't introduce who I am. I don't say, "Look, I'm a podcaster," because that's a bit cringe. But at the end of a conversation, I will say, "Oh, it's been lovely speaking to you. Here you go, have a sticker." And I make nothing more of it. People just love getting a sticker. And then I walk away, don't think anything else. It turns out that was one of my listeners that I'd given a sticker to. And she messaged me afterwards to say, "I thought nothing of it at the time, and it fell out my pocket when I was unpacking, getting home. And I realized it was one of the podcasters I'd been listening to before the festival."
Oh.
Again, surprise, surprise, she got sent a T-shirt as well. But that made my day too. And I didn't realize that. I think it's at that point that I realized that people had built it into their festival build-up, that it was part of their... Glastonbury is an iconic event, and to get a ticket is a real luck of the draw type. They say that there's maybe 20-1 chance against, getting a ticket. So to be there feels like a privilege, and people have a huge build up to it. It's more than just a holiday. And to realize that for those two people, and again, I don't focus too much on the numbers, but for those two people, that I, in a way, was a part of a build-up to something that's very special to them, is a sense of responsibility, and also it's quite heartwarming. It does make you feel like you're a part of the community in a way that I wasn't before.
When you say responsibility, what do you define that as?
We don't really do negativity on the podcast. And what is negative is debatable. We'll give our opinion as to which acts we like and what we don't like, or who put on a good show and who we didn't. But we don't stray into the political side of things. We don't discuss politics, which actually does get discussed a lot at festivals, but we don't stray into that, because there's enough of that content out there to consume.
Yeah.
And the way we see our responsibilities to bring maybe 30 minutes of festival joy, that element of festivals, rather than the activism, And it's not to say it's not valid, it absolutely is. But to bring that festival joy for 30 minutes, particularly over the winter, as we carry on recording, it feels like that we have that responsibility to people to we're going on a journey together. And that's and the example I'll give is we reference coming off X. So we came off the social media platform X in November. And just last week, we explained why, in case people were curious. And we said, we kept it to around 30 seconds. And we said, look, there is so much toxic content on there. We have to troll through it to find your messages, and we don't want to.
Oh, that's a good point.
And we don't want them to have to troll through it to find our messages. And so we said to them, we are off. We came off it in November. And you can find us on other social media. Whether it's better or worse is up for debate. But we decided to draw a line there. But that was the extent of how we referred to it.
I like that. I like how yes, then I can understand it is a sense of responsibility. And I also do, and that's where I come back to that, I remember you talking about that there were different things you could do in Glastonbury, because I thought it was just one festival. And when you made me very aware of is that there's this beautiful festive nature of humanity coming together, and that and that's who you are. Actually, you always see the best out of a person. Even when I've sat down with you, and you always go and you spin it around and seeing the best of the person. And I do feel in this day and age, the fact that we're projected continuously with a lot of negativity stuff or toxic stuff, it's really hard to sometimes for a lot of people to connect back. Well, actually, it's about the joy. And you're hitting back onto that message that come back to the joy of humanity and have that connection.
And you can be honest and you can say, I was at this gig and I didn't enjoy it because I didn't think the artist was as good as they were in previous shows.
Yeah.
But there's an element of media where they'll target the person's personality, or they'll target how they behaved outside of their music career. And we don't want any part of that. That's not what it's about. It's about giving opinions, and that's the raw element of what we do. But can we take the listeners that stick with us through the winter? Now, inevitably, music festivals in the UK is a summer event.
Yeah.
So inevitably, our listeners, there are more of them in the summer versus the winter. But that responsibility feels stronger for those who stick with us through the winter.
Winter, yeah. Because winter is gloomy here. Very gloomy.
We live in a place where it will go dark at 4:30. And it's hard to imagine, given we're talking about Glastonbury, at Glastonbury, which takes place at the summer solstice weekend, where you will see the sunset after 10 o'clock and it gets light at probably 4 or 5 a.m. There's quite a shift when you move into an English winter and you're trying to talk about summer festivals. So you do have to bring that positive energy. Oh, my word, you're really asking the listeners to go through something with you otherwise. And I don't think I'm that good a podcaster to carry them through if I'm talking about negative Bilal. Things. I need some level of positivity to take them on that journey with me. But yeah, that's and we do take it seriously, and we take what we do really seriously. We've recorded an episode and got 15 minutes into it and said, this is terrible. And we stopped the recording, deleted it, and started again. So whilst it does feel sometimes that we just record and send it out into the universe, it's not really what we do. We do actually care.
No, and it's nice because you're consistent with the caring rather than consisting in the producing. It's more consistency of message or feeling. It's not message, I think feeling more than anything, because that human care is, I think when we were talking, I'm quite dabbling into the AI space, and I'm always, wondering how will communication grow? How will human connection grow from there? And when I sit down with you and I hear about your personal life, I hear about how you Glastonbury, I'm like, wow. And You do it with such ease, and I really like it because I don't see that very often. Everyone's very, I don't know if it's a cultural thing here in England, but everyone's very reserved, I find. And they take a while to just say, okay, well, here's the door and open it. While you just rocked up and said, well, here I am. And take it and enjoy it and enjoy it.
Oh, that's absolutely true. It's interesting that you landed on AI there, or you mentioned AI, because at that conference there were a lot of AI systems supporting podcasters to a point where you could just record. You could have an AI record text that you'd inputted into a system, and it would generate an episode for you with two AI voices speaking to each other. One of them replicated off your voice.
Google's doing that now, yeah.
And that's heartbreaking to me. I love technology and I love the advancements in technology. That's what's enabled me to communicate out. You know, we've moved past radio as a mechanism, and would I get into those radio only circles with my media background? Probably not. So technology has advanced my cause of getting my voice out there, but they, to me, feels like a line, and the creep of AI into music or into our forms of media, I think does make me feel a little uneasy. We haven't mentioned this on the podcast because we're not sure how to tackle the subject, but I was listening to a new album by an artist called Caribou, and on one of the tracks there was a female singer on there, and I thought, oh, that's a lovely voice. Mm-hmm. I'll look up that singer and maybe listen to other music that she's produced. And it turns out that it was an AI generated voice over this song on the album, and it made me feel a little uncomfortable listening to that song. I enjoyed the song a great deal, but it felt shallow, and maybe that's my personality, but these shifts, maybe I'm old-fashioned, that's possible, but these shifts in taking human voices away. I love dance music and I love the synthetic sounds that you get, but the voice, that's something that you want to hold on to, and that felt like a compromise too much for me.
You know, I think you'll probably relate. I loved the time period when Avicii came out, and you know, fusing in both of the worlds. I think he really crafted that, and then from then it took off, and that's the kind of upbeat music I like. But I liked it because I still felt he had his signature, or the DJs put their signature on it. But at the same time, also the artist had the signature on it. And so now with AI coming in, and I totally agree with you, because our voice is probably what makes humanity. You know, our melody, our sounds, our tones, everything. So when, like you said, I'm probably on your side of like, how comfortable do I feel on AI? And I don't think, why should I value that? I just can't find myself to value it as I would for those kinds of artists that have put so much thinking and feeling and emotions into it.
And there is a huge question at the moment, particularly with the use of Spotify and Apple Music and royalty payments, which is, how much do we actually value the arts?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the use of AI is devaluing those artists, in my opinion. And I think that's quite sad. And we have had artists on the podcast, and it's no surprise that we've chosen small artists, people who were perhaps on the BBC introducing stage. So we had an artist called Maya Lakhani.
Yeah, I remember her podcast. Loved it.
A fantastic guest. Really easy to speak to, and she's doing it by herself. She holds down a regular job, and in the evenings, her passion is music. So she's trying to get her music out there. She's trying to get an audience, and she managed to she performed at Glastonbury Festival on the BBC introducing stage. People who've performed on that stage include Arlo Parks, Ed Sheeran, Self-Esteem, who I think this year probably will see her headlining one of the smaller stages. And so she's got a little road into it there, or a route into it, and that human story actually brings it home, and how hard artists have to work. Because you can get artists that come off a production line from a record studio or a music studio, or music label, I should say. But there are real people out there really wanting to follow their passion. And it's hard to get an audience anyway. And
now you have another person to be defeated, not person, machine.
How much harder is it that a major record label can turn around and say, well, we won't use an actual human being, we'll just use an AI? It makes it so much harder for those people. But unsurprisingly, those are the people that we want to have on, because their stories are fascinating to me in particular, and Tilly is the same.
I think it's I actually think it's fantastic. No, I don't think. I know it's a fantastic thing to support artists like this. So I can imagine you having them on there. It does give them the value. It does give them their voice also. Going back to what you said, you're British Pakistani. So you're already going to Glastonbury for your timing back then, it was like unheard of, right? So for artists to go on those stage, also from different multi-ethnic backgrounds, has been such a journey.
Absolutely.
Right. And now you have to go with this also with AI. It's like that extra layer that comes on it. And you just think, my God, just when you think you're making head strides, now there's this. And you want to be positive, but I struggle sometimes. What do you think?
Well, this is the reason why we've not addressed it on the podcast yet, because it probably feels like it's just a bit too challenging. We've not figured out how to take the subject on yet between Tilly, the co-host, and I. So we're going to try and figure that out, and also how we can bring it up in almost a fun way, because we do engage with people by making fun of things, and we make serious points underneath it, but we're really trying to be lighthearted, and that's what we're relatively good at, I think. But then it takes you into the essence of what a festival is, and being British Pakistani as well. You get used to, particularly growing up in the 80s and 90s, places where you don't belong. If you take golf courses, for example, I've taken up playing golf in the last 5 years. I enjoy it, but even in the early 2000s,
it was unheard of.
If you were to ring a golf course and say, do you have any memberships available? And you sounded like I do, they would say, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's have a conversation. And they say, can I take your name? And you would give your name, and they'd say, oh, okay, we have a waiting list. And it would change immediately when you gave your name to, yes, we have spaces, to, no, we have a waiting list. Oh, maybe you misunderstood. And so it was very hard to kind of get into some places, and you always were aware that you may not always feel welcome.
Yeah.
The irony, though, that when you go to a place like Glastonbury, or there's so many good festivals, and we're talking about Glastonbury, but there's dozens and dozens of amazing festivals in the UK, that you might walk in there and not see many brown or black faces. There's some, don't get me wrong, there's some, but it probably doesn't reflect the makeup of the UK in percentage terms. But incredibly welcoming. And you immediately feel part of it, to the point that actually nobody comments on it. Nobody actually says anything, because why would they? You're just a person enjoying the music, and that's how you're seen. And so when you do have places like that exist, you do want to put those stories across. And I wasn't quite sure how to present myself in the early days. So actually on the podcast, I introduced myself as Bill, not Bilal. Bill, which is a name that some people do use for me if we're playing football, and I don't have a problem with it.
You don't look like a Bill. Hold on.
I don't.
No, you don't.
But everybody's name gets shortened in football, and in a couple of festivals, I went with some people I played football with, and so if they referred to me as Bill, other people might also. But so I started the podcast, and I almost had this persona of, hey, I'm Bill, and And then actually I got about 5 or 6 episodes in, and I stopped. And I'd almost defaulted to doing it. And I thought, well, wait a minute, that's not my name.
Thank you.
I'm quite proud of who I am. And I thought, do you know what? And this is where not being able to fail is so important. This is where if you're only aiming for 10 listeners, so be it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to change my name because I'm sure I'll find 10 people to listen to a podcast that Bilal is recording. And also, if all the rest don't want to hear the podcast because there's someone called Bilal on there, well, good luck to them. I'm sure they can find something else. I'm sure they're probably having a good time on X right now.
Yeah, I have to say, the first time, because I'm been always passionate about my name. I was like, my name is Kirti, take it or leave it. But over here they can't say Kirti, they say Kurti, or they say it in a very different way, and I'm like, okay, where does the U come in? Because am I saying my own name wrong? I'm literally like, am I doing this wrong? And then whenever I have to spell it, they'll always go with a Y at the end, like Hello Kitty. And I'm like, no, it's Kirti, which is the R not sounding. And I'm like, okay, all right. And now and at one point I went to K. So now you have K-A-Y. And I thought, I am stripping my own identity away by just making it easier. And so I said, no, like you said, it's less is quality. It doesn't mean more is quality, not necessarily. And so your identity is quality.
It is.
Your name is quality.
It goes to the heart of the authenticity conversation we were having. And actually, it's other people's problem, not ours. And if people don't want to listen to my podcast, this, by the way, has never come up. I'm simply talking about how I presented it initially without necessarily thinking about it. But if people didn't want to speak or didn't want to listen to my podcast because I'm called Bilal rather than Bill, well, they do not. They're not the distinguishing factor for whether I'm successful or not. And actually, we joke quite a lot about how much if someone was to give us a negative review, that we probably read it out. Because what are you? It's just words. So what? And what we'd say, and someone, funnily enough, we did do this. Someone left us a 3-star review, so it wasn't the worst thing. Left us a 3-star review, so we came off our 5-star rating on Spotify because of one 3-star review.
Yeah,
okay. And it turns out that you have to listen to 3 episodes before you can give a rating on
I had no idea about that.
Yeah, I think that's either Apple or Spotify. I might have gotten confused. And so on the podcast, my co-host and I, we had the conversation and said, well, if you do think it's a 3 out of 10, why did you listen to 3 episodes? I mean, what are you thinking? We'd be happier if you just gave up after 5 or 10 minutes because they're all the same. We don't really swing from one kind of behavior to another in there. So we kind of felt bad for the person that they'd had to listen to, well, an hour and a half of us. Just let it go, guys. Just move on. There's other podcasts out there. I'm sure you'll enjoy them.
Oh no!
And we did that off a 3-star review. So let alone if someone actually went in on us, we'd have a great time because it's. And I do think this is the Asian part of my upbringing in me, where there's a little bit of fire, there's a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, a little bit of rebellion in there, where you say, "You got a problem with me? I'll take it head on. Just bring it on. What do you think you're going to do? You're going to hurt my feelings." We put on a show where am I allowed to swear?
You can.
Okay. We put on a podcast where we genuinely have a segment called "Am I a Festival Dickhead?" We are not offering serious critique on news here. So what do you expect of us? You're maybe pitching to the wrong people. It's but people have their opinions, and that's absolutely fine, and we reserve our right to make fun of them.
You remind me of my two sisters after me. They're very sassy, so something like this. I just hear my sisters in the background laughing and go, I think you have a you problem.
Oh yeah, it is. A friend of mine once said to me, I think you might have a chip on your shoulder. And it was a really seminal moment for me because he was right. He was a good friend. And actually, it was one of the best things he could have done for me because he helped me understand myself. Oh, this is many years ago now.
Yeah.
But it helped me understand myself that actually the way my behaviors are, the way I gear up for things, the way I don't allow myself to be knocked back by what people might consider failure, or the way I will self-improve is driven by the fact that I do have a bit of a chip on my shoulder, and that baggage comes from how you grow up and how maybe you feel like some opportunities don't come your way, whereas they perhaps things could have been easier, and we all wish that things could have gone a little bit easier. And I had to strive for what I have, and sometimes I feel like I had to strive more than my peers. And yes, actually, that did give me a chip on my shoulder. But it means I don't have an issue with failure because I look back at what I did, and I think, well, what can I do better next time? And that's true for every single episode of the podcast. That's true in my kind of paid working life as opposed to the podcast, and it kind of carries you through because you think, well, okay, maybe I did fail. Or maybe things are stacked up against me, but what am I going to do about it? And it's a you problem, as you say. But I take that as, okay.
But it's not only you. I mean, people who judge you also have a you problem.
They do. But then I can only control what's within my sphere of influence. And I've long since given up trying to put other people in my sphere of influence. It's only me, ultimately.
Well, it's funny you're talking about that because I was telling you about the previous episode, the one that just dropped this week. And I used to be like that. I used to be like, if you're coming in my area, when I was in my 20s, I had studied here and I came back. I went back to Curacao. And when somebody would tell me something, I would be like, I don't have time for you. I just don't have time for this. And I got judged so harshly by that for having to stand for myself because in those days, 80s, 90s, Indian girls were not allowed to have a big mouth. We're not allowed to speak their minds. They were always curbed, And me coming back, I was like, why do I have to put up with this, And so what I did was I actually went on the opposite. I invited too many people in my sphere of influence that I lost my itch, and that now only, ever since I started podcasting, a friend of mine said to me, why don't you ever bring your sarcastic light humor into the conversation? And I said, well, it depends. And they're like, why? I said, because it depends how safe I feel. And that's when I started realizing that sphere of influence around me and how much driven and worried I am constantly about that. And it was only till recently.
It's a really difficult thing to overcome, and filtering people out of your life who don't bring value is
absolutely. I think that's a great way of saying it.
Yeah. And often we associate value with what can you do for me, or some kind of financial kind of value, and I mean it in a very broad way.
Yeah,
and that is, can you bring joy? Can you bring comfort? And I'm paraphrasing from someone else. When do you bring the fact that defeats are softened because you lose together, or victories are sweeter because you win together? It's those kind of values that you're looking for.
Yeah, and that's why I really like when you actually made me want to go to Glastonbury, and not because of the music. You actually made me want to go because of the connections or the experience of the human feeling that you get from it. That's what I find totally, every time I speak to you, I'm in awe by what a festival, not just Glastonbury, but like what a festivals can do on a human interaction level. And I just think that's so beautiful, especially this day and age.
So I met somebody, we're straying into world events here, I suppose. It's something I wouldn't do on my podcast because I think it would catch my listeners off guard, but I've listened to so many of your episodes. I'm sure your listeners will be fine with it. I went with I camped with a group of friends who had other groups of friends there. And we've all seen what's going on in the world, in the Middle East as well. And I'm a British Pakistani and Muslim, quite a secular Muslim. And there I am at this festival, and I'm at this campsite, and I'm chatting to a lady, and I say to her, "Oh, what do you want to go see?" And she wanted to go see Avril Lavigne, and I'd only met her earlier that day. And I said, "Oh, I fancy seeing Avril Lavigne. There's a nostalgia factor here."
Yeah.
And let's go. So the two of us walked over and we had a nice chat and we watched the gig together and we had a nice time. And then afterwards she wanted to go to a different gig. I wanted to go to a different gig and we went off. And she was a Israeli Jew.
Mm-hmm.
Well, none of that mattered.
No.
Because we were just... There's this Israeli Jew and this British Muslim walking down a field to go watch Avril Lavigne because these two people got on and they liked the music that was about to come on stage and they wanted to get a good spot to listen to the music. And actually, that's all that mattered. And did we know our respective backgrounds? Well, by the end of the gig, yes, because, you talk about how you're going to get home and things along those lines. But it doesn't change how we enjoyed the gig together. And there are 200,000 people on that site. And most of the festivals I go to have far fewer, maybe 15,000. And you meet people from all different backgrounds, all walks of life. But you do have that thing in common, which is you're there to have a good time. And you're there to have a good time in a field full of strangers. And those strangers can become friends. That's absolutely fine. And I think it's a very healthy place. And people don't necessarily see it because the people there are just getting on with it.
And you also remind me of one thing is how powerful music in itself is.
Oh, huge.
It brings you together on that same feeling level, the universal feelings you can connect with that is not associated with your background. Just for that one moment, no one's background makes anything when it comes to talking about sadness or love or connections, the music that really stirs your heart.
It's a huge leveler. Now, I mentioned the first guest that I had on the podcast is a friend of mine, and I'm in my 40s. He's in his 70s. Age isn't a barrier.
No.
We're friends. That's all there is to it. And I find I enjoy the company of festival people because there is that mindset there as well. And it just doesn't come up. I think that's the key thing. It just doesn't really come up.
Yeah, that's why I said, if you ask me to go to a concert, for example, you won't find me. I'll be like, yeah, no, I don't want to go. And they'll be like, why? If I go to a concert, I remember the days when we had concerts and there were no cell phones. So you were just looking at the screen and you were having a blast. Mm. But now when I go and I see how most of it, everybody's recording it, I'm like, but you're not in the moment. I mean, just be in the moment. And so for me, I had been carrying this image with festivals and everything. So you completely debunked it. And I was like, I definitely want to do one of these.
Yeah, it's one of those things now, isn't it? There's always a camera available and people make the most of it. You never hear anybody say, oh, I wish I brought my camera with me. Nobody, do you remember you used to say that? It doesn't happen anymore. The idea of being at Glastonbury and somebody would say that to me would now blow my mind. But yeah, you absolutely make a really good point. That being in the moment is something that I think is being chipped away at. Now, this is where smaller festivals are so good, and where when you get away from the main stages of Glastonbury, and there's 100 stages there, and there's
100?
Yeah, there's only 3 or 4 of them televised, but there is 100 stages.
Wow.
They have a bandstand there, which has amazing acts on this bandstand, and sometimes you'll go there and there may be 20, 30 people around the bandstand, and sometimes you are shoulder to shoulder. There's thousands of people there, so it's everything going on. But when you're away from those main stages, you tend to find people less likely to record and more, say, in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that is really important, and it's something that I understand why people do it, because if you go to an iconic event, I do it too. If you go to an iconic event, you want to share how amazing that iconic event is with your friends. We probably will at some point have a segment called "Am I a Festival Dickhead?" for the person who holds the phone above their head for 3 or 4 full minutes.
I was going to ask you that. I was like, are you that kind of person who's like holding it up the whole time? And I'm like,
10 seconds.
Oh, and how much are you going to actually watch that whole thing back?
10 seconds for me. I make a video for 10 seconds and then just move on. And I try to be there in the moment, because I don't watch them back. I might send them to someone. I might put them on the Instagram for our podcast. But I think you end up recording a lot of content that you never consume yourself. So I'm not sure if there's value. But some people like to go back and watch the video that they've made, and that's fine. The only thing I would ask is that you're considerate to the people around you. You know, if you've got someone behind you who's 5'5" and this
5'2" like me,
yeah, and you're struggling to see beyond, men, particularly, we do need to be more considerate who's around us in crowds, and then you're just doubling down by holding a phone above your head. This person behind you is losing the show, because all they're seeing is a LED screen. So yeah, I'm very mindful of that, and it impacts on how little actually I end up videoing.
Okay, so I have a question. What has surprised you the most that all these festivals has given you that you didn't think you were going to get?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think from a physical perspective, I'm amazed how resilient a human body is, because I think a festival almost triggers fight or flight within your body, because you can run for 5 or 6 days, minimal sleep, perhaps not eating that healthily, doing way more exercise than you would do, on way more physical activity than you would do. And your body every day for 5 days lets you do it.
And no tiredness.
You don't feel it. There's so much stimulus that I do think it triggers those fight or flight mechanisms within you. The sound, the smells, and the lighting is a very it puts you on almost a heightened level.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm always surprised as to how your body will let you endure that. And the takeaway from that for me is how you can actually, going back to the chip on your shoulder, actually you can always push yourself a bit more. And you always that drive when you think, oh, can I do this? Well, actually you probably can. And those people who maybe struggle with their fitness, if they go to a 5-day festival and they come back and you go, oh no, actually maybe you can do more than you thought you can. Maybe you can achieve more. So that, from a physical perspective, there's that. From a kind of a well-being perspective, I think it's my personality, and I do feel recharged when I come back from them, because you're always hearing different people's stories. This is very unusual for me, for telling my side to such a point. Normally, I'm where you are, just asking the question. But I do like hearing what people have got up to, what got them there, their little stories, their little anecdotes. There's a long list of people who I would be desperate to interview, because I've sat down with them and I've heard so much about them. But they are not the type to come on but I will sit and I will listen to them talk for hours, and what they have been through, their journeys to either working at festivals or in wider life. You do. It's very heartwarming when you hear people, and I can. There's a reason I do 4 or 5 festivals every summer. There's a balance to be struck. But I try to do quite a lot because I do feel energized coming away from them, because you develop these, you have these moments.
Bilal, you have a family though, right?
Yes, I do.
So how did they wrap their heads around this one? Are they also into all of this, or you go solo, or how does this work?
So I do go solo. It's partly because it is my form of escapism. It's my indulgence there, and I'm very present the rest of the time. I think that's the thing. So whilst there are, let's say 5 weekends that I'm gone, the rest of those weekends you probably find me, taking the kids to a football match, or in which they're playing, or just going on a walk, or going into the countryside, and those types of things. So yes, it is hard to strike the balance, and many people ask me, but I'm actually, for everything I discuss and how much I put myself out there on the podcast, I'm actually quite a private person. So I don't put any of my family on any social media. We took that decision a long time ago, that our children will decide for themselves how much they put on social media. So there's not a single picture of them out there. And
I think that's really beautiful, to be honest.
It's a deliberate choice.
It's very respectful.
Yeah, and they will make those decisions, and they will probably fail in making those decisions, make bad decisions, and they will then learn from those decisions. But if you take all of that away from them, if they grow up already exposed and put out there for the world to consume, then they can't rein that back in. Once it's out there, it's done.
So is it a strange question for me to ask you, how much has this escapism influenced your way of being a dad?
Not really, because it came. I only started going to festivals when my children were probably about 6 or 7 years old. So it came afterwards. Before that, I still had those same doubts whether festivals were for me. So in my 20s, I didn't go.
Oh, you didn't go?
No. It's something I started going to in my mid-30s onwards. What it does, though, it reinforces some of the things that I already thought, which is you need to give children exposure to the arts. And the way we talked about Glastonbury a lot, but the way Glastonbury is set up, if you have children under the age of 12, they don't need to register, they don't need to buy a ticket, they just walk in based on your ticket. So lots of children do go, and they're able just to walk in and see that. Now, I have taken my children to festivals, and I take them to gigs, and I want them to see that actually an artist will come in all shapes and sizes from all different backgrounds, and irrespective of that, there'll be some that they like and there's some that they don't, and the art takes many different forms, and that's the bit that I do like for that. But probably it hasn't changed how I perceive that parenting element, but it probably did reinforce what I was doing anyway.
Well, I like that, the fact that you're mentioning how important the arts and creativity is for upbringing. I think we live in a very logical, everybody wants logic, but without creativity, I don't think humanity would ever flourish. That's my personal opinion on it. So having to introduce it to children like this is part of life. I like it. I think it's amazing. So
the podcast is very different to my day-to-day life, or let's say professional life.
Yeah.
Not to say that we try to be unprofessional in that podcast, but it's very different. And I think one of the reasons I enjoy it is that you are able to engage the creative part of your mind. So my background is law. I have degrees in law, and I've worked in law for over 20 years. It's hard to be creative in law, and you have to engage your mind and apply solutions based on each unique circumstance. So there's a level of creativity there, but it isn't creativity as most people think of it.
Yeah, it's a different definition of creativity.
Exactly. But the podcast does allow me to be creative, to understand how things work, and then play around with how I'm going to make that accessible to the listener. And I do enjoy that. And then also creating the artwork around the podcast, and creating the website, and making it a more creative and engaging place than you would have for a ordinary corporate world type website and line of work. And so that's something that is really big for me. And the arts, there's not. I really respect what they do, and sometimes I do come away from art installations, it's just an example. The poster behind me is from a poster company in Cali in Colombia, and they had been taken over to Glastonbury Festival, and they set up this iconic Colombian poster shop in the festival for 5 days. And what they did, mixing the Colombian influences with the traditional Glastonbury posters, it's fantastic. It's a clash of cultures, but it works, and they're really beautiful pieces of art. And I really respect how someone's brain can decipher very different things, Colombian like Colombian artwork and music posters from the Somerset countryside in England, and make something beautiful out of that. I don't have that ability.
You don't think so?
No, I don't, not in an artistic sense, but I do. I like fixing problems. So I separate them out as, say, podcasting life and professional life. In my professional life, I'm good at reading law. I'm good at. Some people struggle understanding laws, and I never have. Maybe because I've done it for 20 years, and you get good at something if you do it for long enough. And I like, then, the way I phrase it to companies or my clients is, I make things that are difficult to understand easy to understand.
Yeah, totally understand that.
That's the whole premise of my professional life, and I do like solving problems, and that's what motivates me. I'm in the privileged position now that so having worked as in large technology companies doing this, that now I have my own consultancy, and I'm in that privileged position of picking projects that I know I will enjoy, and those are the ones where I will enjoy the problem solving. That's the key thing. So that could be because it's a new sector, or there's something about that company in particular that appeals to me, and those are the things that drive me. I think there is an underlying, what motivates me is, I just want to have fun. Now, you can have fun at work by doing the things you enjoy, and I can have fun with a podcast because I enjoy the conversations. And so it's a fun, or joy, or the pursuit of joy is probably what drives me more than money. And so when people ask me, do you make money out your podcast? To me, that's so far off the mark. Like, I would respect someone more if they said to me, how much joy do you get out of recording episodes? And I'd say, oh, funny you should ask. A huge amount of joy. And the measure that people use, I understand. I understand why you would use that as a measure. It's just not the measure that I use. It's not to say we don't have bills to pay, but what is the driver for me recording a podcast? Well, I think there was an understanding of who I am, what I enjoy, and this vehicle for that pursuit of joy presented itself. It's I can't believe I'm even going to say this, but the moment I realized it was what mattered to me, came in my garden, in my home.
So, in your garden?
In my garden. When I bought this house, one of the first things I did was I planted apple trees. And so there's around a dozen fruit trees around the edge of my garden. And they take 5, 6, 7 years even to start to produce apples. And so you wait patiently for them to grow. And then I remember there's this one particular apple tree, and it gives us bright red, something out of Snow White type apples. You think if you eat this, you're under a spell, right? Really beautiful apples.
And like as delicious or Snow White delicious?
Not Snow White delicious, but absolutely delicious apples, right? The really, really delicious apples. And there was a moment where there I was in my back garden on a beautiful summer's day eating this Disney-esque apple. And I realized that maybe with good luck that there'll be 40 summers where I enjoy those apples, because you can't get them in the shop. You can't buy them. It's not like you can just get them every weekend from your local supermarket. It's unique. It's not the kind of variety that is grown commercially. So the only time I'm going to get it is when it's ripening on my tree in my garden. And I thought, you know what? With a good run and, with good health, there'll probably be 40 times that I'll be sat on a summer's day in my garden eating those apples. And you end up thinking, well, okay, I do need to make the most of this. And those things that make you happy, you do need to pursue when you're able to. And so when people ask me, where do I find time to record the podcast on top of a demanding job in law?
And a garden.
Yeah, those summers get harder and harder in that garden, I know that. Then the driver, the motivator, is that actually very quickly you will be asking, I'm not sure how many times I am going to be able to eat this apple. And it's a stupid thing. I can't believe that's what I'm sharing with you.
No, and I was genuinely. Wait, Bilal, I was just going to say, this is exactly how I want today's podcast to end, for everyone to remember that. That is what probably, for me, such a powerful statement, because you're inviting everybody to think about their pursuit of joy, their own pursuit of joy. Look, you gave me an aha moment, but that was a pursuit of joy. Mm-hmm. You don't realize that you coined it as pursuit of joy. Actually, that's a great name for you, pursuit of joy. Hello, my name is not Bill, not Bilal, pursuit of joy.
Pursuit of joy is not a bad tagline for the next round of t-shirts.
All right. What did you get out of this week's episode? I'm curious. For me, it was about the pursuit of joy. It's remembering that life is not just work, work, work. Life is not just all about being serious and logical, but maybe it's about just dropping everything and for a few moments in time, connecting back with yourself, connecting back with your loved ones, connecting back with your hobbies or the things that bring you joy is actually what life is all about. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and do let me know what you thought about it. Have a good one. Till the next one. Take care.